How much are you prepared to pay for your morning cup of coffee? Price increases could be on the horizon next year as bad weather has affected harvests. What will be the knock-on impact for consumers? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, coffee brands look set to increase their prices after the plant hit record highs on global commodity markets. Two of the world's largest producers, Brazil and Vietnam, have both been impacted by droughts and heavy rain. So, how much will this global issue affect those on the high street needing their daily caffeine hit?
If you like your morning cup of coffee, you could be in for a shock next year. Coffee prices are hotting up as manufacturers look set to increase prices. Bad weather is blamed, hitting the major growers in Brazil and Vietnam. Both countries have experienced frost and drought this year.
The harvest of coffee cherries is very low. We lost a lot of the output. It's very low this year.
Global prices for raw coffee have soared to record highs this month and jumped 80% this year. Drinkers could feel the pinch as early as March, but how much are they prepared to pay?
So I would say £6, absolute most.
I think the maximum I would pay would be £5.
About $8 to $9. In America, you have to pay for alternative milk. It can be up to $1, $1.25 extra, and you also have to pay for extra syrup.
I definitely would go to other alternatives. 15 is too much.
Producers, distributors and everyday drinkers now wait to see just how high prices will climb.
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from Brussels is Bart van Besien. He's policy advisor at Oxfam. In County Wicklow in Ireland, we have Craig Brady. No relation, I should say. He's co-founder of Brady's Coffee. And here with me in the studio, we have Vicky Pryce, Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economics and Business Research. And we have Steve Wateridge. He is Soft Commodities Analyst at the research company Expana. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Bart, I'll come to you first. I mean, a lot of the newspaper headlines about this issue have been looking at the impact on the consumer, when I'm guessing you want to talk about the impact on the farmers themselves, that perhaps for the first year in a long time, they will be getting paid what they deserve to be paid.
Yeah, that's true. If you look at the coffee price historically, if you go back about, I think we get about the same price that farmers used to get 50 years ago. And that's not inflation adjusted. So life has gotten much more expensive ever since. So you could say that today is one of the rare moments where farmers actually are getting a fair price. And you could also say we only get at this point where farmers are getting a price when so many farmers are already very desperate. So many farmers have been leaving the business. So many farmers have been absorbing all of the terrible shocks that the coffee sector has been undergoing.
Steve, to you, what do you make of what we're seeing with the price of coffee? I mean, where it is ending the year and where is it going to go in 2025?
We're at elevated levels for very good reasons. We've had a sequence of poor crops in Brazil, where there's undoubtedly climate change affecting production. The last 4 years have been hotter and drier than the previous 10 years, and the previous 10 years were hotter and drier than the 10 years before that. So there's no question that we're now growing coffee in Minas Gerais and the Espírito Santo in suboptimal conditions. And therefore, to maximise yield, you have to pay the farmer a higher price. In addition to that, we've had problems with the strong El Nino affecting production in Asia, Vietnam and Indonesia, the first and third producers of Robusta. Where it goes in next year is anyone's guess at the moment. It really depends. That we know that the next Brazil crop has been adversely affected by weather. There are some people who've done crop surveys who believe it's going to be a very poor crop, in which case prices will have to go higher because we're in a low stock environment and we will need to destroy demand. We believe from our field observations that the problem isn't as bad this year as it has been previously, and that we may be able to get through the next 12 months without prices going from here, but it's anyone's guess.
Vicky, just spell out for us how this works, because if buyers are paying more for it at source, ultimately not going down the chain, and what happens in Brazil will end up in Billericay or Brazil or Berlin, wherever people are buying their coffee on the street to drink.
It's certainly happening here in the UK. So prices have gone up by about 5%, which actually doesn't sound very high, but it is higher than inflation over the last year. So that is a bit of an issue. But of course, it coincides with the Brits in particular, but lots of other countries too, having discovered that coffee is their drink of preference. So demand has gone up very significantly. And in terms of what happens to the actual price before it even gets to the retailer, who then, of course, puts their own markup, there has been a lot of stocking and buying, basically, coffee early in case there is a problem later. And one of those problems, of course, is the fact that the European Union itself has this directive, which is the deforestation directive, which reduces the amount that you're supposed to be importing, or at least possibly puts extra costs on anything that comes into the European Union if it means that forests have been cropped down because of that production that is necessary to be made. And coffee falls under that category. What has happened so far is that the European Union has delayed the implementation of that directive, so that's good news in a way. So some of the ups and downs in prices you've seen, including some downs which have happened at times, have been because of this directive, in fact, not likely to be implemented for possibly another year.
Craig, to you, you roast coffee beans in County Wicklow in the east of Ireland. Your produce, I've seen it everywhere. You go all over the world. Just tell me, how are you feeling in the industry now, looking at the prices and everything you're paying at the moment?
Well, prices have been rising steadily for the past couple of years. In the past 2 years, I think most roasters have absorbed a portion of it, passed on small price increases, and cafes and things were doing the same. But the 90% rise in the past 12 months is something that we can't take anymore. So mixed with volatility, not knowing where prices are going to end up, it's very difficult to set pricing for next year. But there are big prices increases coming because roasters need to continue to exist, and we can't absorb these price increases anymore. So unfortunately, the end consumer is going to begin to see the effect of it over the next few months.
And just tell me, looking ahead, are you planning already then 2025? You know, you're making your purchases, you're seeing these prices are coming into the system already?
Absolutely. Now, in a way, we're lucky. We bought well this year, but the prices I'm looking at now for buying in 3, 4, 5 months are they're outrageous. They're outrageous is probably the wrong word, but they're unbelievably high. And trying to factor that into the year's pricing is difficult. You know, we don't know where pricing is going to be next September. I suspect not far off where we are now, but it's as the year rolls on, and I think actually into 2026 you'll see the continual rise in prices from coffee roasteries.
So Craig, how many months do you give it until we start seeing a cappuccino or an Americano on the high street jumping up noticeably?
I'd say very soon. I know some very large coffee roasting companies are putting prices up, some of them by 30%. And that's just the reality of it now. I know we will be implementing price increases in January. Now, I don't want to do multiple price increases, so we're trying to find a price point that works for us and works for the consumer. But I think from early next year, you're really going to see the effects in cafes.
Bart, back to you. Just talk to me through life as a coffee farmer, you know, how difficult it is. And I guess it's getting even more difficult now with climate change in places like Brazil and Vietnam, everything we've been reading about in the newspapers.
Yeah, just to be very, very clear, I'm not a coffee farmer, and I'm not speaking on behalf of coffee farmers, of course. But it has been extremely challenging. I mean, many farmers have been running on a loss for many years, and I think one of the reasons they kept doing it is because they love coffee farming so much. It's a profession they are proud of, but they've been losing money for it. You could say they have been subsidizing the coffee industry for decades at a time where the coffee industry has been extremely profitable because of such high market demand that has gone up, but because of certain brands that have gotten big recognition. Climate change has been devastating. Farmers are having to move up higher altitudes to actually keep producing coffee. So, many farmers have left the industry, have left farming, and this is what you get now, right? There have been less people doing it, with some climate shocks on top of it. And that's when the market is actually reacting very slowly. This is a very much delayed effect, what you see right now.
So
where
Steve,
you could say like a moment where farmers are getting what they're supposed to be getting. With this kind of prices, farmers can actually invest in regenerative agriculture, which is the kind of agriculture we should be seeing. It's not the destructive agriculture that the business is based on, right?
So Steve, to you, have we been paying too little for our coffee then for years on end as consumers?
I don't think we have. We've consistently had coffee prices at or above cost of production, only marginally. And obviously there are some farmers who are least efficient who find it more difficult, smallholder farmers in Central America, for instance. But the big farmers in Brazil and Vietnam, they can do quite nicely at 150 cents a pound. We're now at 320 cents a pound, and they're laughing all the way to the bank. I was in Brazil in September, and there was one Robusta farmer who bought himself a $20,000 drone to irrigate his farm. It's not the most efficient way of spending his money, but the revenues to the Brazilian coffee sector this year are going to be somewhere in the region of 100 billion reais, whereas last year it was about 50 billion, and 3 or 4 years ago it was 25 billion. So farmers who could survive at 25 billion, they're doing exceptionally well with the extra revenue.
Vicky, at what point do you think people in a cost of living crisis in a country like the UK will start thinking my daily flat white or latte is becoming that little bit too much of a luxury?
Well, they may, of course, start making the coffee themselves and just carry it with them instead of going into a coffee shop. And there are so many of them around. I mean, life has changed very dramatically, certainly in the UK, but also in other places where coffee is now considered to be the thing you carry with you as a sign of, I don't know, having achieved whatever it is that you've achieved in terms of status in your life. So there will be cutbacks. I can't see people being really prepared to pay an awful lot more than they do at present, which many consider to be quite extravagant, habit to have anyway. So I think that the retailers, or rather, the shops that sell those coffees will see, without any doubt, some reaction from the consumer. So there is a limit to how much, coffee shops can really up their prices, and we might actually see a number of them just stopping doing so, or thinking of alternatives that they can entice the customer for, like go back to tea. Although we have had tea scares as well, of course. But the other interesting thing, which has encouraged people to drink coffee, is that there is a lot of evidence that says that actually coffee is good for you, and a certain number of cups sort of keeps you going, affects your heart positively, et cetera, which is interesting. So even young people are thinking that this is a healthy thing to do. So prices will need to go up quite a lot before people really give up on the habit, and I think that's where we are right now.
Craig, we grow many things in Ireland, but we don't grow coffee beans. Just tell us your story, how you got into the business and what you do in County Wicklow.
So I always wanted to be a coffee roaster. It was kind of my dream job. We had a different business. It was actually a gift and souvenir company. And I saw a gap in the market for a very strong Irish brand that produced a great coffee. So we positioned ourselves at the start into the gift and souvenir market with our branding and our name and all that. And it was successful from day one almost, and allowed us to start the roastery and get going from there. And our product and brand has had a real connection with people outside of Ireland. So we now distribute to 50 states in America. We send our coffee all over Europe, and we specialize in a barrel-aged coffee, which is where we age green coffee in used Irish whiskey barrels and then roast it up, and you end up with a beautiful Irish whiskey coffee. And like that's part of our success, is diversifying from the standard offering within the coffee industry. And I think that's where a lot of coffee roasters are going to have to start looking to diversify, to look at other avenues to sell coffee different markets. Cold brew is another big one that's growing at the minute. It's a project that we're working on now, and I think other companies are going to start going down these routes.
And Craig, just tell me, where do most of your beans come from then?
Brazil and Colombia are our two main places we buy from. Honduras is another big one. So we've been we have long-term relationships with farmers. We're not moving away from them. We can sit down and talk to them, and we know what's coming, and they understand what we need. And I think that's a vital part of growing your business at the moment, is to have suppliers that will engage with you and you can sit down with, and you're not relying on a third party to do your negotiations or to find out kind of information like that. And that's a vital part of it, is to keep long-term relationships going.
Bart, talk to me about climate change and the role that weather is going to play in coffee production in the next few years. I mean, Oxfam must be concerned about what they've been seeing.
Maybe can I firstly quickly react on the point that was made before, that coffee farmers have been getting above price of production price. So, and then the example of Brazil was given. And, I just want to point out, Brazil is specifically the country where you have the biggest plantation kind of production. And there are big issues of wage labor that is underpaid. So there's always been, the past decades, there's always been someone, either the farmer or the wage worker, who has been underpaid. On climate change, well, it seems like it's accelerating. I mean, our world economy is based on, these crops that are produced in many different regions that are facing different climate patterns now. You see this thing going on in cocoa, where West Africa has been devastated by different weather patterns. Now you have the same in coffee. It looks like these things are accelerating. And actually, I think what our friend coffee roaster is doing is actually the good example. If you engage in direct relationship with farmers, that's how farmers can become resilient to these climate shocks. I think the current market system that's based on future prices, stock markets, it's just not adequate for the challenges we're facing in the future.
Steve, how concerned should we be then about climate change when it comes to coffee production?
My view on climate change, as I say, I think there's evidence to support the fact that it's happening. We are now growing coffee in suboptimal areas. Now, we can try to move the coffee into better regions, just as you see wine growing in the southeast of England, which never used to happen. Yeah. Or we have to pay the farmer more so that they can fertilise, irrigate, take better care of their farm and improve yields that way. It's not a question of Minas Gerais and Espírito Santo, you can't grow coffee anymore. You can, but we're getting more and more weather shocks with hotter and drier weather, and farmers have to be able to adapt.
Vicky, a lot of products that we love in the West, whether it's chocolate or our morning coffee before work, it seems that the weather is having a huge impact on the farmers at source. I mean, from an economic perspective, what are we likely to see in the next few years if climate change keeps causing the damage that it's causing?
Well, we may have to be facing higher costs for everything we buy and the things we want to eat. So, but it's interesting because food prices have gone up and down quite a bit over the last few years. I mean, they did go up very much after particularly COVID up to a point, but then with the war in Ukraine, so we've seen quite a lot of shortages appearing. And since then, for most of the last couple of years, prices have been coming down. They're beginning to go up again, and coffee is one very good example. So the overall trend should be one of rising prices. But in terms of what we pay at the end, at the consumer end, we've got to also factor in transport costs. And they've been going up significantly again recently after coming down again quite significantly. So the final price has that too. So the real question is, are there going to be impediments in the future in terms of even moving things around? And there could be, given all the geopolitics that are out there, or things could ease quite significantly. Who knows? So it's not very clear where we will be. But overall, with climate change, it would be extraordinary if we didn't just anticipate food prices to continue to go, well, on average, to be going up year after year.
And just this week in the UK, we've seen inflation go up again to 2.6%. water bills will be going up 36% in the next 5 years across Britain. I mean, this cost of living crisis overall, I know buying a coffee every day is a luxury for many people, but the cost of living crisis, do you think in 2025 we've not seen the end of it?
We haven't seen the end of it. It doesn't mean that it's going to go back to where it was. But interestingly enough, when you look at the latest data, it also includes grocery prices, which had been going down, now actually, or at least slowing down very significantly, now going up again year on year. So this is a trend to watch.
Craig, it's interesting what Bart said. He was praising the fact that you have a relationship with your farmers. You're able to speak to the growers at source. I mean, does that fill you with confidence going into a new year that the challenges can be ridden through?
Well, the thing about these challenges, it's about being open and accepting things the way they are and facing them head on. So putting our head in the sand and hoping for lower prices was getting us nowhere. So engaging with the farmer and you knowing where you stand with them and they knowing where they stand with you does give us stability, which is actually the key factor in all this. The high prices are a problem, but it's the volatility which is the real problem, I feel, where the farmer doesn't know if he's going to be getting half the price this time next year. And it's very hard for the farmers to plan, to invest, when they don't even know where the price of coffee is going in the future. So having that relationship does give both of us a bit more security and a bit more confidence in what we're doing over the next year, 2 years, which helps the farmer to plan and invest and helps us get better coffees effectively.
And Craig, you said earlier on you export to all 50 states in the United States. Do you notice a difference between different countries in terms of what they'll tolerate on price?
Yeah. Americans don't like high prices, from what I can tell. According to my negotiations, they don't like high prices. But like we're in Ireland, and we have a very expensive economy to exist in. So we're in a high-priced economy. So when we go off and discuss pricing with other countries, there's probably a bit of flexibility there. But like Ireland has its own unique problems with inflation and the cost of living here. I was out the other night. I don't go out that often anymore, and it was €11 for a pint of Guinness, and the pub was jammed. And I was thinking, €5 for a coffee doesn't seem too bad when people are paying €11 for pints in Temple Bar.
I think we need to get you down to Wexford sometime, Craig, in the future in 2025. Bart, just to you, the one word that jumped out there from what Craig was saying, volatility, that can't be good for the farmers.
Yeah, it's the same thing I've been hearing in these past times. I mean, it's kind of interesting, isn't it, that the height of the price doesn't seem to be such a problem. It's the volatility. So what I keep hearing from traders is also, we don't mind paying such much higher price or lower price. It just let us know. We don't want to run too many risks. And this risk we can constantly have is leading to a very inefficient system where a lot of speculators are making the money instead of the farmers. So I think this is the time now we have where we are actually paying farmers a fair price, where companies should say, we could keep doing this. Let's just keep paying a fair price, and we will not be so sensitive to this volatility. So paying a fair price is a matter of human rights. So this could be part of their human rights policies in the companies. And it would be good for business if all the companies would do it.
Steve, just on that issue of volatility, are we likely to see a decrease anytime soon, or is it going to be a very uncertain year to come?
I don't think we're going to see any decrease. We're in a low stock environment, and therefore relatively small changes in perception of what's happening with the crops or what's happening on the demand side can lead to significant swings. We've also got a situation on the futures market where prices are moving very rapidly day in, day out, and that involves margin calls. There's a lot of money tied up. Some traders can't afford to pay their margin calls, so they're forced out of their position. There are some farmers around the world, when the price goes up, they refuse to deliver, default on the contracts, and that adds to the volatility. So I don't see in a high price, low stock situation we're going to have any lowering in volatility.
And final point to you, Vicky. So ultimately, it will be the consumer as ever who will pay more.
Oh, absolutely. And I think they will have to. The only question for me is how much will they put up with? And that's a big, big risk, I think, for anyone who is producing the crop, if you like, which we eventually have to enjoy. And as you know, both in Greece and Turkey, it's the sort of Turkish and Greek coffee. We drink a lot of coffee, and you know, my own personal interest is, please, can I carry on drinking it?
Wish you all a very happy New Year. Vicky, Steve, Craig in County Wicklow in Ireland, and Bart in Brussels. Thank you all for your contribution to Roundtable. Remember, you can see more debate and discussion on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.